It was a bright, sunny day in a little town called Oakville. The sun glowed high in the sky, painting everything warm and golden. Birds sang happy tunes from the trees, and a soft wind danced through the air, making flowers nod their heads. The streets were quiet, just the way they usually were. Sarah Miller stepped along the sidewalk, her cane tapping a gentle beat tap, tap, tap. Her guide dog, Rusty, stayed close, his paws making a soft patter beside her. Sarah couldn't see a thing. She'd been blind since she was small, so she used her ears and hands to figure out the world. Most folks in Oakville knew her face or thought they did. They'd wave and say, "Hi, Sarah," even though she couldn't wave back. But there was a secret about her nobody caught onto. A big one. A wild one. Sarah didn't make a fuss. She stayed calm and quiet, like a still pond. She'd smile at the sound of voices and say soft hellos. People liked her because she was sweet. They'd see her walking with Rusty and think, "Oh, that's just Sarah and her dog." They figured she was simple, easy to understand. But they didn't have the whole picture. Rusty wasn't some regular pup you'd find chasing a ball in the park. His fur shone like polished wood, and his eyes sparkled with something smart, something sneaky. He looked friendly, sure, but under that fluffy coat was a mystery. A giant, possum mystery nobody in town had sniffed out yet. That afternoon, Sarah was on her way home. She'd just left the grocery store, where old Mr. Jones had packed her bag with apples and bread. "Take care, Sarah," he'd called as she left. She'd nodded and said, "Thanks," like always. Now, she moved down the street, her cane tapping out her path. Rusty trotted along, his leash loose in her hand. The day felt normal, birds chirping, kids laughing somewhere far off, cars humming now and then. Sarah liked days like this. They were peaceful. She didn't hear anything strange at first. Not a peep. But then, something changed. A sound crept up. A low, grumbly noise. It grew louder. And louder. Until it wasn't just a sound, it was a roar. Down the road came a pack of bikers. Their big, shiny motorcycles growled like angry animals. The noise bounced off the houses, making windows shake. Dust flew up behind them as they sped closer. They wore leather jackets and helmets that glinted in the sun. Their engines went vroom vroom, loud enough to scare the birds away. Sarah didn't hear them right away. Sound takes a second to reach you when you're blind, you have to listen hard. But Rusty? Oh, he noticed. His ears perked up, sharp and tall. His nose twitched. He didn't bark or pull. He just watched. Sarah felt his body shift a little, like he was ready for something. She tilted her head, curious. What was that noise? The bikers spotted her. They slowed down, their tires squeaking on the pavement. The leader, a tall guy with messy hair, grinned wide. His buddies followed, circling around Sarah like a bunch of crows around a shiny coin. To them, she looked small. Easy to tease. Her cane tapped, her steps were slow, and she had a dog that didn't even bark. They thought she was weak. Someone they could mess with for fun. "Hey, look at this," one of them shouted, laughing. Another revved his engine, making it roar extra loud. They didn't know it yet, but they'd picked the wrong person to bother. Oh boy, were they in for a shock. Sarah stopped walking. She stood still, listening. The bikes rumbled all around her, and the air smelled like gas and dirt. Rusty stayed by her side, his fur brushing her leg. He didn't growl or jump. He was super calm like a statue. But his eyes? They followed every move the bikers made. Sarah gripped her cane a bit tighter. She couldn't see the men, but she could hear them. Their voices were rough and loud. She could feel the ground shake under her feet from their engines. Most people would be scared. Most people would run. But Sarah? She wasn't most people. And Rusty? He definitely wasn't most dogs. The bikers kept circling. They didn't get too close, not yet. They just wanted to have some fun, to feel big and tough. One of them, a skinny guy with a squeaky laugh, pointed at Rusty. "Look at that lazy mutt," he yelled. "Doesn't even move." The others chuckled, nodding. The leader leaned forward on his bike, staring at Sarah. "What's a lady like you doing out here all alone?" he called. His voice dripped with a mean kind of teasing. To them, this was a game. They thought they'd scare her, make her nervous, then ride off laughing. They had no clue what was waiting. No clue at all. Sarah didn't answer right away. She stood there, feeling the sun on her face, hearing the bikes hum and growl. She wasn't mad. She wasn't shaking. She was just waiting. Rusty's tail flicked once, then stopped. His ears stayed up, catching every word, every sound. The bikers didn't notice how his muscles got a little tighter, how his paws pressed harder into the ground. They were too busy joking. Too busy thinking they were in charge. They didn't see the spark in Rusty's eyes, the kind of spark that says, "I've got this." But Sarah knew. She always knew. See, Sarah and Rusty had been together a long time. She got him years ago, after she lost her sight. Back then, people told her, "You need a guide dog. Someone to help you walk." So Rusty came along. He was trained to lead her, to keep her safe. But there was more to him than that. Way more. Sarah didn't talk about it. Why would she? It wasn't anyone's business. Plus, it was kind of fun keeping it hush-hush. Nobody in Oakville asked questions. They just saw a blind lady and her furry friend. They didn't wonder where Rusty came from or what he'd done before. That was their mistake. The bikers revved their engines again, making the noise bounce all over the street. A few people peeked out their windows, curious. Kids playing nearby stopped and stared. Everyone could hear the commotion, but nobody stepped out to help. Not yet. Sarah didn't mind. She didn't need help, not the kind most people thought. She had Rusty. And Rusty? He had her back in ways nobody could guess. The bikers kept laughing, circling tighter now. They were getting braver, louder. "What's wrong, lady?" one shouted. Too scared to talk. They thought they had her pinned. They thought wrong. So, here's the big question: what happens when a bunch of loud, tough guys pick on the wrong person? What happens when they don't see what's right in front of them? You're about to find out. This isn't just any story, it's got twists, it's got surprises, and it's got a dog who's way more than he seems. Stick around, because you won't believe what's coming next. The bikers were loud now, really loud. Their engines growled like hungry lions, shaking the quiet street in Oakville. The leader was a tall guy named Spike. He was big, with a messy beard that looked like it hadn't been brushed in weeks. His jacket was black and shiny, covered in dust from the road. He twisted the handle on his bike, making the engine scream vroom. He leaned forward and yelled, "Hey, lady. Where you going with that mutt? Lost or something?" His voice was rough, like gravel crunching under boots. His friends, 5 other guys on bikes, laughed hard. They slapped their knees and leaned back, acting like Spike had said the funniest thing ever. One of them grabbed an empty soda can from his pocket. It was silver and crumpled, sticky with old pop. He tossed it toward Sarah's feet. It clinked on the pavement, rolling a little before it stopped. Another guy threw one too, just for fun. The cans didn't hit Sarah, but they landed too close. She didn't jump or yell. She stayed calm, like a tree standing still in the wind. Her hand tightened on Rusty's harness, just a little. Rusty was her guide dog, her best buddy. He stood by her side, his brown fur catching the sunlight. Sarah's lips moved, soft and quiet. "Just heading home," she said. Her voice was gentle, like a whisper you'd hear in a library. Spike's mouth twisted into a smirk. He looked at his buddies, then back at Sarah. "Home," he said, dragging the word out like it was a joke. "You sure you can find it, blind girl?" His tone was mean, sharp like a poke with a stick. The other bikers burst out laughing again. Their voices mixed with the rumbling engines, making a big, noisy mess. One of them, a skinny guy with a leather jacket that was too big for him, pointed at Rusty. He had a goofy grin, showing teeth that weren't very clean. He bent down, picked up a stick from the ground, and waved it in the air. "Fetch, dog," he shouted, tossing it right at Rusty. The stick flew fast, spinning a little. It landed near Rusty's paws with a tiny thud. But Rusty didn't chase it. He didn't even twitch. He just stood there, tall and still. His eyes were bright and sharp, like little lights watching everything. His ears stood up, catching every sound: the laughs, the engines, the wind. The skinny guy frowned. "Huh? "What's with that pup?" he said, scratching his head. Sarah tilted her head a bit, listening to them. A tiny smile pulled at her lips, just a hint, like she was hiding something fun. She didn't say a word, but that smile? It meant she knew something they didn't. Something juicy. Spike wasn't done. He kicked his bike's tire with his boot, making a dull thump. "What's wrong with that dog?" he sneered. "Too dumb to play." His voice dripped with tease, like he was daring Rusty to do something. The other bikers nodded, chuckling. They moved their bikes closer, tires squeaking on the road. The circle around Sarah got smaller. Their shadows stretched long on the ground, dark and wiggly in the sunshine. The air felt heavy, like when clouds pile up before rain. You could almost taste it, something big was brewing. Sarah didn't move an inch. She didn't shake or cry. But Rusty? His body changed. His legs got stiff, his muscles bunched up under his fur. He was ready. Something was coming. "Can you feel it?" The skinny guy laughed again, high and squeaky. "Look at her," he said, pointing at Sarah. "She's just standing there. Too scared to talk, huh?" He rocked back on his bike, acting all tough. Another biker, a short one with a red bandana, joined in. "Yeah, what's she gonna do? Wave that stick at us?" He meant her cane, the one she used to walk. They thought it was funny. They thought she was helpless. Spike crossed his arms, leaning on his handlebars. "Come on, lady," he said. "Say something. Or are you lost without your little pet?" His eyes flicked to Rusty, then back to Sarah. He was testing her, pushing her. But Sarah didn't bite. She stayed cool, her face smooth like a pond with no ripples. Her cane rested in her hand, steady. She could hear them, their voices, their bikes, their mean little jabs. She didn't need to see to know what was happening. Rusty stayed close, his warm side brushing her leg. His tail didn't wag. His nose didn't sniff the air. He just watched. His stare was like a laser, cutting through the noise. The bikers didn't notice. They were too busy giggling and showing off. "Maybe she's deaf too," the skinny guy said, slapping his thigh. "Nah, just slow," the short one added. They kept going, tossing words like they tossed those cans. The street wasn't so quiet anymore. A few people peeked out from behind curtains. Mrs. Carter, who lived in the blue house, squinted through her window. Two kids on scooters stopped down the block, staring wide-eyed. The bikers didn't care. They liked the attention. Spike revved his engine again, louder this time. It roared so hard the ground buzzed under Sarah's feet. "Move it, lady," he barked. "You're blocking our road." His buddies cheered, pumping their fists. They inched closer, their tires crunching tiny rocks. The circle tightened. The air got thick, like it was holding its breath. Sarah's smile didn't fade. It stayed small, sneaky. She shifted her weight, just a bit, so her cane tapped once tap. Rusty's ears flicked. His paws pressed harder into the pavement. The bikers didn't see it. They didn't catch how his fur bristled, just a little. They didn't hear the tiny growl in his throat so low it was almost nothing. Spike leaned forward, his beard swaying. "What's the matter?" he said. "Dog got your tongue." He laughed at his own joke, and his friends howled. They thought they were winning. They thought they were big shots. But they weren't. Not even close. Sarah knew it. Rusty knew it. The tension was like a rubber band, stretched tight and ready to snap. The bikers kept circling, louder and bolder. The skinny guy threw another stick thwack, and it bounced off the ground near Rusty. "Come on, mutt. Chase it," he yelled. Rusty's head turned, slow and smooth. His eyes locked on the guy, steady and fierce. The skinny biker stopped laughing. Spike," he said, his voice wobbling. "That dog's looking at me funny." Spike waved a hand. "Relax. It's just a pet. Nothing to worry about." Oh, but there was something to worry about. Something huge. The bikers didn't feel it yet, but it was there, hiding in plain sight. Sarah's grip on the harness stayed firm. Her tiny smile grew, just a smidge. She could hear their engines, their taunts, their boots scuffing the road. She could feel Rusty's heat next to her, his strength waiting. The bikers thought they had the upper hand. They thought she was easy prey. But the storm was building. The air crackled with it. Something was about to happen, something wild. Can you feel it creeping closer? The short guy with the bandana revved his bike, copying Spike. Let's go, lady, he shouted. Get out of here. His voice was sharp, like a bark. The others joined in, yelling over each other. Yeah, move. Go home. Take your dumb dog with you. Their bikes hummed and sputtered, filling the air with noise. A soda can rolled past Sarah's shoe, kicked by a tire. She didn't flinch. She didn't step back. She stood her ground, calm as ever. Rusty's head lowered, just a bit. His eyes darted from one biker to the next, tracking them. His tail stayed still, like a flag with no wind. Spike grinned, showing yellow teeth. She's not moving, he said to his crew. Guess she likes us. They laughed again, loud and wild. The skinny guy hopped off his bike, bouncing on his feet. I'll make her move, he said, taking a step closer. He waved his arms, like he was shooing a bird. Shoo. Shoo. Go on. He was close now, too close. Sarah's head tilted again, listening to his footsteps. Rusty's growl got a tiny bit louder, a rumble deep in his chest. The skinny guy didn't hear it. He was too busy acting silly. The tension was thick now, like fog you could touch. The bikers were having fun, but it wasn't fun for long. Sarah's calm was like a shield. Rusty's stillness was like a promise. The bikers didn't know what they were poking. They didn't see the spark ready to light up. Spike leaned back, crossing his arms. Last chance, lady, he said. Move, or we'll move you. His voice was hard, like a slammed door. His buddies cheered, revving their engines again. The noise was everywhere, swallowing the street. But Sarah didn't budge. Rusty didn't blink. The storm was here. It was quiet for 1 second, one tiny heartbeat, then everything would change. Can you feel it? It's so close now. Days before this big moment on the street, Sarah had heard trouble brewing in Oakville. It wasn't quiet trouble, it was loud, messy, and wild. The same bikers who circled her now had been zooming around town for weeks. They didn't care who they bothered. They scared little kids riding bikes, making them jump off and run home crying. They knocked over trash cans with their boots, leaving garbage all over the sidewalks. They laughed and shouted like the town belonged to them. Sarah didn't see it with her eyes, she couldn't, since she'd been blind since she was a kid, but she heard it all. Her ears were sharp, picking up every yell, every crash, every roar of their engines. She never said a peep about it. She just listened, quiet as a mouse. Rusty was different. He didn't just listen, he watched. Sarah's guide dog wasn't like the pets you see chasing balls or begging for treats. Rusty had big, bright eyes that saw everything. His brown fur looked soft, and his tail wagged sometimes, but there was more to him. Way more. Years ago, before he came to live with Sarah, Rusty had been in tough places. Scary places. Places these bikers couldn't even dream of. He'd sniffed out danger in war zones, where bombs boomed and dust flew. He'd run across battlefields, barking to warn people about bad guys hiding nearby. He'd saved lives, lots of them, by being brave and smart. He even took down crooks, pinning them down with his strong paws. But now he was retired. That's what people said. He lived with Sarah, helping her walk, keeping her safe. Or so everyone thought. Back on that sunny street, the bikers didn't have a clue. They didn't notice Rusty at all, not the real Rusty. They saw a dog standing by a blind lady, and that's it. They didn't catch how his body moved a tiny bit, shifting his weight from one paw to the other. They didn't see how his ears perked up, flicking toward every sound they made, their loud voices, their engines, their boots stomping. Spike, the big guy leading the pack, leaned closer to Sarah. His beard was scruffy, and his jacket smelled like oil. He stretched out his leg and poked Sarah's cane with the tip of his boot. Tap. Just a little nudge, but it was rude. Move it, lady, he said, his voice low and bossy. You're in our way. Sarah didn't jump or yell. She stood still, her cane steady in her hand. She took a slow breath, letting the air fill her chest. Then she spoke, soft but clear. You might want to back off, she said. Her words were calm, like a teacher telling kids to sit down. The bikers didn't expect that. They froze for a second, then burst out laughing. Loud, wild laughs that bounced off the houses. "Oh yeah," Spike said, grinning big. "What's a blind lady gonna do about it?" His buddies howled even more, slapping their bikes and rocking back. The skinny one with the floppy jacket pointed at Sarah. "She's funny," he squeaked. "Real tough, huh?" They thought it was a joke. They thought she was nothing. But Rusty didn't think it was funny. His head tilted just a little. His eyes locked on Spike, sharp and steady. Then it came, a growl. It started low, real low, like a rumble you feel in your belly before you hear it. It wasn't loud yet, just a quiet warning. The kind of sound that makes your stomach flip, like when you're on a swing and it drops fast. The skinny biker heard it first. He was closest to Rusty, still giggling about Sarah. But that growl stopped him cold. His laugh died in his throat. His eyes got wide, and he stepped back. Spike," he said, his voice shaky. "That dog's lookin' weird." He pointed at Rusty, his finger trembling a bit. Spike didn't even look. He waved his hand like he was swatting a fly. "Relax," he said, rolling his eyes. "It's just a dumb pet. Nothing to worry about." His voice was lazy, like he didn't care. The other bikers nodded, still chuckling. "Yeah, it's just a mutt," the short one with the red bandana said. "Probably scared of its own shadow." They kept laughing, thinking they were so smart. Famous last words, right? They had no idea what was coming. Rusty's growl stayed soft, but his body told a different story. His legs tensed up, like springs ready to pop. His ears stayed high, catching every word. He wasn't scared. He wasn't dumb. He was waiting. Sarah heard the growl too. She knew what it meant. That tiny smile on her lips got a little bigger, not much, just enough to show she wasn't surprised. She'd heard that sound before, back when Rusty first came to her. She remembered the people who brought him serious folks in uniforms. They told her, "This dog's special. He'll take care of you." She didn't ask too many questions then. She just nodded and took his leash. But over time, she learned. Rusty wasn't like other dogs. He didn't chase sticks or bark at squirrels. He watched. He listened. And when something wasn't right, he acted. Sarah trusted him. She didn't need to see to know he had her back. The bikers kept going, oblivious. Spike kicked at the ground, sending a pebble skittering across the pavement. "Come on, lady," he said. "Move already. We got places to be." His boot nudged her cane again, tap, tap. The skinny guy hopped around, waving his arms. "Yeah, shoo," he yelled, like Sarah was a bird he could scare off. The others revved their engines, making the air shake. The noise was everywhere, loud and mean. A few people down the street peeked out their doors, frowning. Kids stopped playing, staring at the commotion. But the bikers didn't care. They liked being loud. They liked being in charge. Rusty's growl got a tiny bit louder. Not much, just enough for the skinny guy to step back again. "Spike, I'm serious," he said. "That dog's creepy." His voice was high now, like a kid who'd seen a spider. Spike snorted. "You're such a baby," he said. "It's a guide dog. It's trained to sit there and look cute." He leaned closer to Sarah, his shadow falling over her. "Right, lady. Your little buddies all bark, no bite." He grinned, showing teeth that weren't very white. His buddies laughed again, nodding. "Yeah, all bark," the short one said, mimicking a dog with his hands. They were so sure of themselves. So sure they were safe. But they weren't safe. Not even a little. Rusty's eyes followed Spike's every move. His growl faded, but his body didn't relax. His paws pressed into the ground, steady and strong. Sarah's hand stayed on his harness, feeling his warmth. She didn't say anything more, just let them talk. She knew Rusty didn't need her to tell him what to do. He'd figure it out. He always did. The bikers didn't see the clues. They didn't notice how Rusty's tail stopped moving, how his nose twitched at their smells: oil, sweat, soda. They didn't catch the way his fur stood up, just a bit, along his back. They were too busy teasing. Days ago, Sarah had heard them ride past her house. She'd been sitting on her porch, sipping water, when their engines roared by. She'd heard kids yell and run off. She'd heard a trash can tip over, clanging loud. She didn't get mad. She didn't call anyone. She just sat there, taking it in. Rusty had been with her then, lying by her feet. His head had lifted, his ears turning toward the sound. He didn't bark, just watched the street, even though Sarah couldn't see it. She'd patted his head and said, "It's okay, boy." But she knew he didn't think it was okay. He remembered things. He noticed patterns. That's what made him special. Now, on this street, those same bikers were back. They didn't know Sarah had heard them before. They didn't know Rusty had seen them. They thought this was their first meeting. They were wrong. The skinny guy kept pacing, nervous now. "I don't like that look," he muttered, staring at Rusty. "He's too quiet." The short one laughed. "Quiet? That's 'cause he's boring." He revved his bike again, making it sputter. Spike crossed his arms. "Enough," he said. "Let's go, lady. Move, or we'll roll right over you." His voice was hard, like a slammed book. Sarah took another slow breath. "I said back off," she repeated, still soft. The bikers hooted. "Oh, she's mad now," Spike said, smirking. "What's next? You gonna cry?" They thought they had her cornered. They thought Rusty was nothing. But that growl? It was a clue. Those sharp eyes? Another hint. Something was building something big. What do you think Rusty's about to do? He's not just a pet. He's not just a guide. He's something else. Keep watching, because the truth is sneaking closer. The street was buzzing with noise, the bikers' engines, their loud voices, the wind kicking up dust. Spike, the big guy with the messy beard, was done waiting. He'd been teasing Sarah, poking her cane, laughing with his buddies. Now he wanted to show he was the boss. He leaned off his bike, his boots crunching on the pavement. His hand shot out, fast, reaching to grab Sarah's arm. He thought he'd yank her, scare her good, make her jump. His fingers stretched closer, almost touching her sleeve. But then bam, it happened. Fast as lightning. Quicker than a blink. Rusty moved. Oh boy, did he move. Sarah's guide dog didn't wait for Spike to get near her. He exploded into action, like a rocket blasting off. In one giant leap, he flew through the air. His paws hit Spike square in the chest, wham, and down Spike went. The big biker toppled off his bike, crashing to the ground with a loud thud. His helmet bounced once, twice, then rolled away. Rusty landed on top of him, pinning him flat. A snarl ripped out of Rusty's throat, a big, booming growl that bounced off the houses and echoed down the street. It wasn't quiet anymore. It was loud, fierce, scary. Spike's eyes went wide, his mouth open, stuck in a gasp. The other bikers freaked out. They stumbled back, tripping over their own feet. Their bikes wobbled, some tipped over, crashing with a clang. The skinny guy with the floppy jacket yelled, "What the?" His voice squeaked, high and shaky. He dropped the stick he'd been waving, and it clattered on the road. The short one with the red bandana slipped, landing on his butt. "Whoa," he shouted, scooting away fast. Their tough guy act was gone. Now they looked like scared kids, eyes popping out, mouths hanging open. Rusty stayed on Spike, his paws pressing hard. His teeth showed, sharp and white, gleaming in the sun. He wasn't playing. Not one bit. Sarah didn't move at first. She stood there, her cane steady in her hand. Then she stepped forward just one step and straightened up tall. Her voice came out clear, strong, like a bell ringing. "I told you to back off," she said. "Rusty doesn't like bullies." She didn't yell. She didn't need to. Her words cut through the air, calm but sure. Spike squirmed under Rusty, his hands pushing at the ground. "Get this mutt off me," he gasped. His voice was all wobbly now, not big and tough like before. He twisted and kicked, trying to wiggle free. But Rusty didn't budge. Not an inch. His growl got deeper, rumbling like thunder. Spike wasn't going anywhere. The other bikers didn't know what to do. They stood there, frozen, staring at Rusty. The skinny guy rubbed his eyes, like he couldn't believe it. That dog just did he stammered. The short one got up, brushing dirt off his pants. He's crazy, he said, pointing. Their bikes lay scattered, some still rumbling, some quiet now. The street looked like a mess, with soda cans and sticks all over. People peeked out from windows and doors, their faces pressed to the glass. Kids down the block dropped their scooters, mouths open. Everyone saw it. Everyone heard that snarl. Rusty wasn't just any dog. That's what made this moment wild. See, Rusty had training, serious training. Years ago, before he lived with Sarah, he'd been a Navy SEAL dog. A real one. He'd worked with soldiers, tough guys in uniforms. He'd sniffed out bombs, found hidden bad guys, and kept people safe. His nose was like a superhero sniffing danger from miles away. His legs were fast, his jaws strong. He'd leap over walls, dodge trouble, and tackle anyone who tried to hurt his team. He'd saved lives, over and over. That's why he was special. But then he got older, and the soldiers said, "Time to rest, Rusty." So he retired. They gave him to Sarah to be her guide dog. Or that's what they told everyone. But Rusty didn't forget. All that training, all those missions, they stuck with him. Right now, on this street, it all came back. His eyes were sharp, like little fires. His ears stood tall, catching every sound: Spike's gasps, the bikers' yells, the wind. His paws pressed down, holding Spike tight. He wasn't just a guide dog helping Sarah walk. Oh no. He was a weapon, a furry, growling weapon. Spike didn't know that. The bikers didn't know that. They thought he was some lazy pet. Boy, were they wrong. Sarah crossed her arms, standing over Spike. Her tiny smile grew bigger, not a lot, just enough. She could hear Rusty's growl, feel his strength through the harness in her hand. She wasn't scared. She wasn't surprised. She'd always known Rusty was more than he looked. The bikers, though. They were lost. The skinny guy backed up more, bumping into his bike. It fell again, crash, and he jumped. "That's no normal dog," he said, his voice all high and squeaky. The short one nodded fast. "Did you see that jump? He's nuts." They whispered to each other, darting looks at Rusty. Then one biker, the quiet one with a green cap, did something smart. He pulled out his phone. His hands shook, fumbling with the screen. Wait, he said, stepping back. "There's a tag on his vest." He squinted at Rusty, trying to read it from far away. The vest was black, with little letters stitched on. He zoomed in with his phone, fingers trembling. "Let me check this," he muttered. He typed fast, pecking at the screen. The others watched, holding their breath. Spike was still pinned, grunting under Rusty's weight. "Hurry up," he snapped, his face red. The guy with the phone gasped. His face went pale, like he'd seen a ghost. "Guys," he said, his voice tiny. "It says, 'Retired military canine, do not approach.'" He looked up, eyes huge. "This dog's a freakin' SEAL." The words hung in the air, heavy and loud. The bikers froze. All of them. The skinny guy's jaw dropped. The short one blinked fast. Even Spike stopped squirming, his head turning to stare at Rusty. What?" he croaked. The phone guy held up the screen, showing a picture of a dog just like Rusty, proud, strong, with a soldier next to him. "Navy SEAL," he said again. "Like, the army kind." Sarah's smile got wider. She tilted her head, like she was enjoying this. "Surprise," she said, her voice smooth and happy. She didn't laugh, but you could tell she wanted to. The bikers didn't see that coming, not in a million years. They'd been teasing her, calling her weak, poking fun at Rusty. Now they were the ones looking silly. Rusty's snarl softened, but he didn't move. His paws stayed on Spike, keeping him down. His eyes flicked to Sarah, then back to the gang. He was in charge now. No question about it. The skinny guy dropped his phone, clack, and it skidded across the road. "A SEAL dog," he squeaked. "Like, a soldier dog." The short one tugged his bandana, nervous. "We messed with the wrong lady," he muttered. The guy with the green cap shook his head. "We're toast," he said. Spike grunted, pushing at Rusty's legs. "Get off," he yelled, but it was no use. Rusty was like a rock, a big, furry rock with teeth. The bikers didn't know what to say. They just stood there, staring, their tough faces melting away. Sarah didn't need to see their shock. She heard it, their shaky breaths, their quiet whispers, the way their boots shuffled back. She'd warned them. She'd said to back off. They didn't listen. Now they learned the hard way. Rusty wasn't just her helper. He was her guard, her friend, her hero. All that time in wars, all those days being brave, it never left him. He looked like a regular dog, with his soft fur and wagging tail. But inside, he was a fighter. A protector. And he didn't let bullies win. The street went quiet for a second. The engines hummed low, some turned off. The wind blew a soda can, making it roll tink, tink. People watching from their houses gasped. Kids pointed, whispering. "Did you see that?" one said. "That dog's awesome," another yelled. The bikers didn't feel awesome. They felt small. Spike's face was red, his beard dusty from the ground. Okay, he said, his voice cracking. "Call him off, lady." Sarah didn't answer right away. She let him sweat a little longer. Bet they didn't expect this, huh? The street was a mess after Rusty's big move. Soda cans rolled around, kicked by the wind. Bikes lay tipped over, some still humming low. Spike was flat on his back, pinned by Rusty's strong paws. His face was red, his beard full of dirt. He didn't look tough anymore. He looked scared. Rusty's growl rumbled deep, making the air shake. The other bikers stood back, their eyes wide, their boots stuck to the ground. They didn't know what to do. Spike squirmed, his hands pushing at the pavement. Okay, he muttered, his voice all shaky. "We're sorry." He didn't yell, it just whispered, like he hoped no one else would hear. Sarah stood tall, her arms crossed. Her cane rested in her hand, steady as a rock. She didn't say a word, just listened. She could hear Spike's fast breathing, his little grunts as he tried to move. She could feel Rusty's strength through his harness, his warm fur brushing her leg. That tiny smile on her lips stayed there, calm and sure. Rusty's growl got quieter, slowing down like a car running out of gas. He looked at Sarah, his ears flicking up. She nodded, just a tiny nod, so small you'd miss it if you blinked. That was the signal. Rusty stepped off Spike, lifting his paws one by one. But before he backed away, he gave one last growl, a short, loud bark that snapped through the air. It said, "Don't try me again." Spike scrambled up fast. He brushed dirt off his jacket, his hands shaking. His helmet was gone, lost somewhere in the mess. "Let's go," he yelled to his buddies. The bikers didn't wait. They ran to their bikes, tripping over each other. The skinny guy with the floppy jacket grabbed his ride, pulling it up with a grunt. The short one with the red bandana kicked his engine on, making it sputter. The guy with the green cap jumped on his seat, not even looking back. Engines roared loud, vroom, vroom, as they hit the gas. Tires squealed on the road, kicking up dust and pebbles. They peeled out, zooming away faster than you can say bad idea. Down the street they went, smaller and smaller, until they were just dots, then nothing. The air got quiet again. The wind blew soft, rustling leaves in the trees. Birds started chirping, like they'd been holding their breath. Sarah stood there, listening to the engines fade. Rusty sat by her side, his tail wagging once, then stopping. His ears stayed up, making sure the bikers were really gone. People peeked out from houses, stepping onto porches now. Kids ran closer, their scooters clattering on the sidewalk. "Wow," one yelled, pointing at Rusty. "That dog's so cool." A lady in a yellow dress clapped her hands, smiling big. The street wasn't scared anymore, it was alive. Word spread fast in Oakville. Really fast. By the next morning, everyone was talking about it. At the grocery store, Mr. Jones leaned over his counter, telling customers, "Did you hear? Sarah's dog took down those noisy bikers." People nodded, their eyes wide. At the park, kids ran around, pretending to be Rusty. Grr, they'd say, jumping on each other. I'm the super dog. Moms and dads whispered over coffee, passing the story along. She's blind, but she's tough, one said. And that dog? He's something else, another added. The town buzzed with chatter, like bees in a hive. Sarah didn't say much about it. She didn't need to. She woke up the next day, same as always. She put on her shoes, grabbed her cane, and clipped Rusty's leash on. They walked out her front door, stepping into the sunshine. The air smelled like grass and flowers. Her cane tapped the ground, tap, tap, tap like it always did. Rusty padded next to her, his fur shiny, his nose sniffing the breeze. They headed down the street, just like any other day. But it wasn't the same, not to everyone else. Kids saw her first. A little boy with a red cap waved from his yard. "Hi, Sarah," he shouted, bouncing on his toes. "Hi, Rusty." A girl with pigtails ran up, holding a stick. "Can Rusty play?" she asked, grinning. Sarah smiled back. "Maybe later," she said, her voice soft. The kids giggled and waved as she passed. Down the block, old Mr. Thompson sat on his porch, grumbling like usual. He was the grumpiest guy in town, always mad about something. But when Sarah walked by, he tipped his hat. Just a little tip, but it was new. "Morning," he mumbled. Sarah nodded. "Morning," she said back. Even the grumpiest neighbors were different now. People knew something they didn't before. They'd always seen Sarah as the quiet blind lady with a dog. Now they saw more. They saw her standing up to those bikers. They saw Rusty leap like a hero. They whispered about it at the diner, at the post office, in backyards. "Mess with her," they'd say, "and you'll answer to him." Rusty wasn't just a pet anymore. He was Sarah's guard, her buddy, her secret weapon. Folks looked at him different now, his bright eyes, his strong legs, his calm way of walking. They wondered what else he could do. They wondered where he came from. Spike didn't come back. Not the next day, not the day after. The big, tough biker with the loud voice and messy beard was gone. Some folks said they saw him ride out of town that night, his bike wobbling like he couldn't steer straight. Others said he was too embarrassed to show his face. A blind lady's dog took him down, they'd laugh, shaking their heads. He thought he was so big, but he's hiding now. Kids made up stories about it. "Spike's scared of dogs forever," one said. "He's probably crying somewhere," another giggled. Nobody knew for sure where he went, but one thing was clear, he wasn't coming back to Oakville anytime soon. The other bikers stayed away too. That pack of noisy guys with their shiny bikes and mean laughs. They were history. The streets got peaceful again, no more engines roaring, no more trash cans tipping over. Kids rode their bikes without looking over their shoulders. People walked their dogs without jumping at every sound. Oakville felt safe, like it used to. Sarah and Rusty made that happen. They didn't brag about it, they didn't need to. Everyone else did the talking for them. Sarah kept her routine. She went to the grocery store, where Mr. Jones gave her an extra apple. "For Rusty," he said, winking. She smiled and said, "Thanks." She stopped by the park, where kids ran up to pet Rusty. He sat still, letting their little hands pat his fur. "He's so soft," one said. "But so strong," another added. Sarah listened to their voices, feeling the sun on her face. She didn't need to see their smiles, she could hear them. Rusty's tail wagged a little, thumping the ground. He liked the attention, but he didn't show off. He stayed by Sarah, same as always. People started leaving gifts at her door. A bone for Rusty, wrapped in a red bow. A plate of cookies with a note that said, "You're awesome." A kid drew a picture Sarah with her cane, Rusty jumping on a biker. It wasn't fancy, but it made Sarah smile when someone read it to her. "They like us," she said to Rusty, patting his head. He licked her hand, his tongue wet and warm. They didn't ask for the fuss, but it felt nice. The town wasn't just scared of Rusty, they loved him. They loved Sarah too. Days turned into weeks. The story grew bigger every time someone told it. "Rusty flew like a superhero," one kid said. Sarah didn't even flinch, a lady added. "Those bikers ran like chickens," an old man laughed. It became a tale everyone knew, a little piece of Oakville magic. Sarah didn't mind. She liked her quiet life, but she didn't stop the chatter. It was fun hearing people talk, fun knowing they saw her strength. Rusty didn't care either. He just walked with her, sniffing flowers, chasing the odd squirrel when no one was looking. Spike's name popped up sometimes. He's still embarrassed, people would say, grinning. A big guy like that, taken down by a blind lady's pet. They'd laugh over their coffee, picturing his red face as he ran. Some said he moved far away, to a town where nobody knew him. Others said he sold his bike, too ashamed to ride. Looks can fool you, they'd say, nodding. You never know who's tough till they show it. Sarah didn't talk about Spike. She didn't need to. He was gone, and that was enough. Oakville changed a little after that day. People were kinder not just to Sarah, but to everyone. They waved more, said hi more, helped each other out. Maybe it was Rusty's growl that woke them up. Maybe it was Sarah's calm voice. Whatever it was, it stuck. The town felt warm, like a big hug. Sarah and Rusty walked through it every day, part of it all but still themselves. She tapped her cane, he padded along, and life went on better than before. So here's the thing about Sarah and Rusty, it's pretty amazing when you think about it. Sarah can't see the world with her eyes. She's been blind since she was little, so she doesn't watch the sun go up or the birds fly by. But that doesn't mean she misses out. Oh no. She feels everything. She hears the wind whisper through the trees. She smells the flowers blooming on her street. She knows the sound of Rusty's paws tapping next to her, pat, pat, pat. She might not see faces, but she knows people by their voices, their steps, their laughs. And guess what? She's stronger than anyone thought. Way stronger. People in Oakville used to look at her and think, oh, that's just Sarah. She's quiet. She needs help. They saw her cane and her slow steps and figured she wasn't tough. But they were so wrong. Sarah stood up to those mean bikers without even blinking. She didn't yell or run. She stayed calm, like a tree that doesn't bend in a storm. She didn't need to see to be brave. She felt the danger, heard the noise, and trusted Rusty to handle it. That's real strength, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that sneaks up and surprises you. And Rusty? He's the best part of the story. He's proof that heroes don't always look like you expect. You might think a hero wears a cape, like in comic books, flying around, saving the day with a big swoosh. But Rusty's different. He doesn't have a cape. He's got fur, soft, brown fur that shines in the sun. He doesn't fly, he walks, wagging his tail sometimes, sniffing the ground like any dog. But when trouble came, he leaped into action. He didn't wait or hide. He jumped on Spike, pinned him down, and growled like a thunderclap. Heroes don't need capes, sometimes they wag tails and bark loud. Rusty showed that in a big way. Think about it for a second. Next time you see someone and think, they're weak, stop and wonder. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're like Sarah, quiet on the outside, but tough inside. Maybe they've got a Rusty by their side, ready to surprise you. The quiet ones, the ones who don't brag or shout. They've got the biggest tricks up their sleeves. You can't tell just by looking. That's what this story teaches us. Looks can trick you, but actions show the truth. Let's picture something fun. Imagine you're walking down your street. You see a kid sitting alone, reading a book. He's small, maybe shy, not saying much. You might think, he's not strong. He's just a kid. But what if he's got a secret? What if he's super smart, like a detective, figuring out puzzles nobody else can? Or maybe he's got a pet like a turtle that's slow but sneaky, helping him in ways you'd never guess. You wouldn't know until something big happened, right? That's how it was with Sarah and Rusty. Nobody saw it coming, not the bikers, not the town, not even old Mr. Thompson with his grumpy hat tipping. This story makes you think about people differently. Take your friends, for example. Who's the loud one, always talking and jumping around? You might think they're the toughest. But what about the quiet one, the one who listens more than they speak? Maybe they're the real hero waiting for their moment. Like Sarah, they don't need to show off. They just wait, steady and sure, until it's time to shine. And when they do, wow, it's a surprise that sticks with you. Rusty's a lesson too. He looked like any dog, cute, furry, wagging his tail when kids petted him. But he'd been a Navy SEAL dog. He'd sniffed out danger, saved soldiers, and tackled bad guys. All that was hidden under his soft coat. It's like finding a treasure chest in your backyard. You'd never guess it was there until you dig. People are like that sometimes. They've got stories, skills, brave hearts you don't see at first. Rusty wagged his tail, but he also growled when it mattered. That's what makes a hero, doing the right thing at the right time. So what's the big idea here? Don't judge too fast. Don't look at someone and decide they're weak or small or not important. Sarah couldn't see, but she felt the world deeper than most. Rusty looked like a pet, but he was a fighter. The bikers learned that the hard way. Spike thought he was big and tough with his loud bike and mean words. But he ran off, tail between his legs, because Sarah and Rusty were stronger. It's not about how you look, it's about what you do. That's the secret they showed us. Let's think about you for a minute. Yeah, you. What's your strength? Maybe you're good at drawing, making pictures that make people smile. Or maybe you're great at helping friends when they're sad, listening when they need it. You might not feel big or loud, but that doesn't matter. You've got something special inside, like Sarah's courage or Rusty's jump. It's there, waiting for its moment. And when it comes out, people will notice. They'll say, "Wow, I didn't know you could do that." Just like they did with Sarah and Rusty. This story's twist was wild, wasn't it? One minute, the bikers were laughing, thinking they were in charge. The next, Rusty flipped everything upside down literally. Spike went from big talker to big faller, flat on the ground. Sarah went from quiet lady to super cool, standing tall. What did you think of that? Did it make you cheer? Did it make you laugh? Tell me in the comments, I want to know. Did you guess Rusty was more than a guide dog? Or were you shocked when he leaped? And here's a fun question, would you mess with Rusty? Picture it, you're riding a bike, maybe making noise, and you see him coming. His ears are up, his eyes are sharp, and he's got that growl ready. Would you stop and say, "Nope, not today," or would you try to test him? I'd pick the safe choice. Rusty's not messing around. What about you? Drop your answer below, I'm curious. This isn't the end, you know. Sarah and Rusty are out there in Oakville, walking their streets, living their days. Maybe more adventures are coming. Maybe more bullies will show up, thinking they're smart, only to run away fast. I bet Rusty's ready for it. I bet Sarah's smiling, knowing he's got her back. They're a team, a quiet, strong, surprising team. And us? We get to keep their story in our heads, thinking about it when we see someone quiet or small. So next time you're out, look around. Who's the Sarah in your world? Who's the Rusty? They might not say much, but they've got power waiting to pop out. Don't miss it. Don't judge too quick. Heroes hide in funny places, sometimes behind a cane, sometimes under a wagging tail. That's the cool part. That's what sticks with you. See you in the next story. Can't wait to share another one.